Sparkling anyone? Sorry, okay. Thank you. Joe?
Just got that. That's got as a bell. It's like this
So thanks everybody for coming. The glasses of bubbly are coming for the girls, so they'll now be lubricated to communicate with us. But my name's Steve Collier and I'm your moderator for tonight's panel. So welcome everybody on behalf of Exceed Global and the team. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people on whose lands that we're celebrating tonight's event. They're elders past and present, so thank you Wurundjeri people for letting us be here to have a conversation about customer experience. So I guess I thought what we might first do is talk a little bit about how we're going to run tonight's proceedings. I hope, like me, you're here because you are genuinely interested in what customers do experience in Australia, whether we think they're getting a good enough deal out of all of us actually, and what we can do better. But when we were discussing the format for tonight, I guess Bella's vision has been that there isn't a place where people who are industry professionals in their various fields that are focused on the customer can come together without a tech or software vendor trying to sell you something, where you're in a relatively informal setting where you can have a bit of a conversation about the customer experience, and in a place where it's actually okay to say we don't have all the answers, because I think the reality is, and I'll be interested in your views through the course of the evening, I don't think there is anybody that's absolutely nailed it in this country. We're all starting at very, very different places on the spectrum in terms of the businesses that we're in, how mature they are, the types of customers that you've got. But what we just know is the customers are getting more demanding. And the more information they have at their own fingertips, the more great experiences they get in industries that we potentially don't operate in, they're just expecting a lot more. And so I guess tonight what we're going to do is take the opportunity to explore a few different things. Certainly, what does digitisation of CX mean? And I ran NAB's contact centres for many years. I ran all of our digital channels, and I didn't see people switching from one channel to another. I just saw them using all of them a lot more, right? And somehow we had to respond and manage our cost bases and still deliver great experiences for our customers, but also for our shareholders. So tonight we're going to start with some curated questions that I'll ask the panel from myself. We'll probably grab a bit of a comfort break somewhere in the middle, let you top your drinks up, and then have the opportunity for you to ask some questions of your own. And then there's certainly the opportunity to network at the end of that, have a couple of drinks and something else to eat. And we'll play a little bit by ear. So if it goes a little bit slow, I might call on the audience to help pick us up, but we'll just see how we go. So that's the plan for tonight.
You're going to say if it goes a bit pear-shaped.
If it goes a bit pear-shaped, I'll do the traditional Australian thing and blame somebody else for that. So,
Give us more champagne. Yeah.
Give you more champagne, okay. But I thought we might start by introducing our three panellists. So firstly, Jan O'Keefe here on my left, the General Manager for the customer at AHM Health. So Jan, you were in the legal sphere for a long time, but you jumped out of that and you got into the customer space, and you've spent the last 7 years working in customer-focused roles in utilities and health. So Medibank, and now with the new role in AHM. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, well, I'm a dirty Kiwi, as you can probably tell by my accent. So I've been in Melbourne for the last 6 years, working in primarily customer-facing roles at Red Energy in the utilities sector, and then came over to Medibank, running one of their contact centres before I went out to Wollongong. We had the unique sort of experience at Medibank. We purchased AHM a long time ago for a market share play and left the asset there really with minimal investment. And about 5 years ago, 7 years ago, we decided actually dual brand strategy in this market where customers are getting more demanding. You can play to different demographics, there's more data out there. We decided to rebrand our AHM book and go for a premium offering with our Medibank brand, very health conscious, and then go for a more easy, simple, affordable approach with AHM. AHM then became the fastest growing health fund the industry had seen for 5 years, so was up in Wollongong with the team there before coming back to Medibank. But like you mentioned, Steve, I started off my career as a lawyer for the New Zealand fishing industry. I was their general counsel for about 7 years, and I got very bored of handing my opinion over and having no control at all about what the business did with it, what the impacts were, what risks they were going to take. And I thought that looks much more fun, doing the problem solving around should we do it, should we not, can we afford it, how do we implement it, what will the customers think. And I thought I need to get over where the action's happening rather than just continually sort of giving my opinion on things and having no input. So that's kind of where the leap to customer experience came.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you. So Anne Weatherston, 2 years as Energy Australia's Chief Transformation Officer. Reporting to the CEO, big job, mandate to just about change anything as long as it's right for the customer and right for the stakeholders. 5 years as CIO at ANZ, that was a big job. Certainly I bumped into you and some of your team back then when I was doing large transformation roles in the NAB, and then a bunch of time in the UK. And I was just saying to Anne, I asked her to give me a couple of fun facts, but she's far too busy transforming Energy Australia, so I didn't get any of that. But I found out the fun fact that I think we both worked for the National Australia Group for about 2 years at the same time when I was actually in Glasgow and you were doing a strategy role. So it's a very small world. So a little bit more about your career, because you've been in some big jobs across the UK in large financial services organisations and some other stuff.
Yeah, well, I could probably take the entire evening talking about me because I've been working a very long time. But to kind of cut to the chase, I actually started out as an archaeologist, believe it or not, so nothing to do with any of this business stuff. Then realised I'd be poor for the rest of my life, and at that time IT was becoming the thing of the future, and I went into IT and found it completely boring. So after 5 years, retrained in business. And then everyone in business knew nothing about technology at the time. So guess what? I ended up becoming a CIO, and that's really where I spent a lot of my career. But CIOs, as you know, are pretty much now on that borderline between transformation, because it's all about technology, and so I spent a lot of my career in strategy, IT, and now transformation. Mainly financial services, I think, but a bit of energy now, and also retailing, which so I've got a good multi-industry background as well. In fact, one of my claims to fame when I worked for NAB was I probably built one of the first ever multi-channel propositions and also single customer view, which didn't survive the Australian investment whatever, but yeah, so that was mid-90s. We were building some pretty sophisticated technology.
So your archaeology background will come in handy when you look at some of the systems that you find in some of our organisations.
Particularly ANZ, actually, it was very useful.
Yeah. Sorry, Mike, he was one of them. He's
yeah.
All right, thanks,
Also,
Anne.
I should say I'm Scottish, obviously, but I do carry an Australian passport now, so hey.
And Bella, an industry expert in customer experience.
Yes.
Somebody that's passionate about it, that's writing books about it, that's talking a lot about it.
It's just travelled and came back.
And I was about to
blogged
say,
about it.
and I'm sure, having just been to Disney and seen what great customer experience looks like, and you've probably had some interesting customer experiences of your own, knowing that everywhere you go, you tend to benchmark them and judge them and rate them. So what else should people know about you that they might not know?
I don't know. I used to be a speech pathologist, like salsa dancing. I don't know. We've had Exceed now for 5 years, and yeah, I've had a great opportunity to go to a conference and pretty much just be there because I wrote a book and chat about the book. So it was pretty good. I didn't even have to present. It was the cruisiest thing I've been asked to do in my career. And while I was over there, I decided to go and attend a Disney leadership course. I did a lot of research around Disney when I wrote the book. And so I really wanted to just see what it was all about and experience Disney. And I blogged my whole trip, which the team were fortunate enough to hear about half of it yesterday. And I put together a deck, I videoed things, photographed things, and really keen. And I'm a typical consumer. I tried Uber Share, Uber Extra Large, which we don't have here, cabs to see what the cab experience was like, and did lots of mystery shopping.
Right, so, best and worst customer experience on the trip?
My best and worst customer experience would easily have been, my worst would have been Telstra, because their travel pass application was
People
down.
are shocked. People are shocked.
I know. And so I was told, oh, ring back, keep ringing back. And as you can attest, Fiona, at the airport, it was quite stressful knowing that I promised everyone I'd still be online to hear that their application was down and I couldn't get a travel pass, and just to keep trying. And then keep getting texts, because they said you could maybe use your phone within reason, but didn't define within reason. Anyway, I could talk about that forever. And I had some very interesting Disney experiences which were completely negated my leadership training. And again, I'm happy to talk about that. On the positive side of things, Disney's recovery was really good, but I had so many recoveries that by the end of it I was over the recoveries. So I got cab charges because I didn't get my Disney Magic Express. They forgot to pick me up. They mucked up my my pass for all the theme parks, which is important for me to do my homework for the course. So I kind of needed to go to the parks because the expectation was you would have been before your course started. So there's little things like that. But really interesting customer experience in shops, probably Michael Kors. Fantastic customer experience. I had maybe bought a couple of handbags and a wallet and a clutch to match one of the handbags. And while I was in a very short queue, I had a girl come up to me and say, hey, I've noticed you've got this bag. There's a handbag that matches. It's $35 US, it's on sale. But it looked really good with this bag, and it's very similar to the clutch you've got for the other bag that you've bought, because I like matching lots with handbags. And I was sold. And also they had a person in the room who basically was almost, it was like watching an orchestra. There was a person in the store and he was managing the team and they were working the room. He had another staff member who was obviously his 2IC across the store, and they were using hand signals to make sure that everyone got really good customer experience. Cool. They were really quite good. So Michael Kors, I'd say, was quite good.
So we might move on to some of the questions that we thought about before the session today. I'm going to start with actually who has accountability for the CX strategy, because in my experience at NAB, well, we've got about 5 chief customer officers of various divisions. That sounds great in theory, but somebody at the back has to orchestrate it all in the operations area and the IT area, etc. So I guess question for you, Anne, is how do you decide who's got accountability for the CX strategy, and what happens if it's more than one person?
Well, I think there's probably not a right answer to this, because I think it's still evolving. Ultimately, I think the challenge of CX is strategy and then consistency of approach. So really, the only person that can truly own it is the CEO with their management team, because it's got to come from the top. If you then say, well, actually, the person that operationalises that is the chief customer officer, then I'm kind of okay with that, but then it's how do they actually make it happen? It's a little bit like the child being chief transformation officer, to be quite blunt, because you haven't really got much power other than influence. So I think the role of chief customer officer then becomes that they've got to agree the strategy, set the plan, and then manage the plan, which will require them to have a level of authority, because obviously they have to work across boundaries. That's the tricky bit. And really the only way you can do that is by getting CEO, C-suite sign off to the KPIs, the metrics, and then you're monitoring that gradually. But it's a challenging one, because we know CX really encompasses everything. And if there's any gaps or breaks in the experience, then effectively you don't have a CX strategy that's compelling. So that was kind of where my head's at, and I think it will evolve actually. And certainly it was at ANZ, the whole concept of somebody who owned customer experience end to end was just really not understand. The only bank I could find globally that was doing it was the US Armed Forces Bank, USAA, where effectively they had created the chief customer officer who actually did have the power over the division. So they weren't purely just a, if you like, a transformer, they were actually owner of that end to end. But I don't see too many organisations yet moving to those structures.
So Jen, what about AHM or Medicare? Medibank, sorry. Medibank, sorry.
I think we've obviously just got a new CEO midway through last year, and he came into we replaced our CRM system, paid about $100 million for a new CRM system, which obviously has brought some interesting experiences, mainly negative for our customers in the rollout, and so he faced right into that. And our last CEO, George, he's very passionate, had taken the business to a place where it was all about better health for all Australians. Very outward focused, very into the health sector, looking outwards, and Craig's really come in from NAB. He was ex-CFO at NAB. He's really come in and faced inwards and said, well, actually, we don't have a right to play in that space unless we're actually doing the right thing by our customers. So no one's going to listen to what we're saying about health or health information or what options we've got out there to really create better health experience for all Australians, not just people that have private health insurance, if we're not actually doing the right thing by our customers. And you can really see, to what Anne was saying, once that agenda is set, all of a sudden NPS is on your scorecard, everyone suddenly mobilises in a different way. It becomes a common language for people to work towards. We've only recently put customer experience teams in at both our brands. We have a Medibank customer experience team and an AHM customer experience team. And I like to think AHM's in a much better position because we have a very deep demographic. We have a very clear, we're very targeted with our brand. We have one type of, our customers all look very similar. Medibank is a legacy brand. It has a whole lot of different customers, and I think it's harder to design something when you're a bigger brand. You've got more offerings. You don't just sell health insurance, you sell pet insurance, travel insurance, health outcomes, interactions with hospitals. It's much harder to get a consistent approach when you've got a big brand with lots of people. The wheels take longer to move. When you're a smaller brand, you've got a deep demographic with one type of customer generally, who really want to do things without talking to you where they can. So they're quite self-sustaining and self-sufficient. So we're finding that it's easier when you're a smaller brand with less people to get the message across much more clearly across all of your channels, all of your vertical and horizontal teams to actually all pull in the same direction. We get the benefit of all the Medibank work, research, information, and then we just apply it and move on and run with it. So it's get the best of both worlds.
So on that, listening to customers is obviously important. I guess the question lots of people ask is, do customers actually know what they want when we ask them? So how do you go about understanding from a customer's perspective what good looks like, especially in a brand where self-service might be the route that they use to do a lot of their interactions?
I think at this stage, we're at the stage where customers are telling us what they don't want.
Okay.
So I think a lot of customers know what they don't want or when they've had a negative experience. We've only just started measuring inactive NPS, so people that haven't had an interaction with us, what do you feel about our brand? How many people have a negative NPS score but don't actually leave us? So they're kind of just, is it a grudge purchase? Maybe I want to hear from you, maybe I don't. They don't know what sort of interaction they want to have with you, but they're not satisfied right now. So what does that look like? How do you get that information? We've got text analytics over our NPS surveys, and again, this is all quite new. We're certainly not very mature in our journey at all. Easy, simple, affordable. We've got to have our costly, and so we can't have the creme de la creme. But I think for us it's about, there's some really big pain points that I think you have to eliminate first before you start to design. So trying to fix some stuff at the root cause rather than just the negative outcome. I think you get trapped and say, oh, we'll send them reminders to send in this form, or, you know, we need to remind them they have to get this form in within 30 days. Well, let's remove the form. And that removes the whole experience. And what could you do instead if you're not engaging with them at that point? Could you do something different? So I don't think customers know what interactions they want. They don't want the stuff that pisses them off in the admin, but they want the value add. They don't know what the value add is because they expect us to know a lot more about them than what they used to. So customers expect us to know where they live, who lives with them, what sorts of things they're consuming through our products. Whether for us, we've got a lot of claim information, how we're using that. We should know they're nearing the end of their limits. Could we give them an upsell? If they've been with us for a while, what could we offer them? They expect us to know that and offer them the value add and remove the admin and the pain.
What about you, Anne, with customers? What do you get from them? Do you get good feedback about the things that they want, or just the things they don't like?
Well, I think we're in a, we're in a different stage than maybe the health providers or the banks, meaning that at the moment the energy industry is still very much about the commodity type relationships. So to be blunt, whether we like it or not, the relationship's really all around price.
Yep.
And what you get is, if I sign up to a mortgage with a bank, chances are I'm going to stay with them for about 25 years. But if I sign up to an electricity plan, in reality, I can sign up to it and a week later I can leave. So that's a big challenge. We are, as an industry, however, going through massive disruption.
Yeah.
I'd say moving from banking into energy, it's significantly more disruptive than as an industry than banking. So forming that customer relationship is an imperative. So as Isabella knows, we're doing a lot of work now to get customer insights as a first priority, but also then start to measure the customer experience when they deal with us. So the key thing is really that we're trying to get to the analytics that will inform us better about what actually will initiate what we call propensity to churn. So churn rates in the industry are about 16%, which is massive. Obviously, each customer that churns costs money, and you also have to find, for example, to find 100,000 customers, new customers, additional customers, you've got to find 700,000 customers who will churn.
Yeah.
So it burns up a lot of internal cost. So forming some simple views about the customer, like propensity churn, is pretty important. It's the first stage. But as we transform as an industry, getting deeper insights into the customer is critical, because we've got to drive some profitability from the engagement and also longer term retention.
It's interesting too, because as they churn in utilities, as people start to get used to switching, it doesn't really matter what industry
It's
it
a
is,
flow on, yeah.
because they get used to switching in there, and they go to iSelect or an aggregator, or they think, oh, well, I've changed that. Oh, okay, well, maybe while I'm here, I'll look at something else. I'll look at my car insurance, my health insurance.
But it used to be in banking, I think it still is actually, you're more likely to get divorced than change your bank account.
Yeah.
So, and that in itself is not necessarily a good thing, because it builds a complacency into the relationship, but certainly not true in energy.
Yeah.
Well, we speak about companies who have high churn like energy. Let their exit be graceful, because they're likely to come back, the wheel turns, and customers are quite fickle if you do the smallest thing to annoy them. And I found that even in the client presentations I saw in the US, they will churn, but they may come back. So it's really important that you do try to save them, but if you lose them, make it as nice as possible, because, you know, they may come back and it may be sooner than you think. The grass may not be greener next door.
And leaving is one thing, but leaving and bad-mouthing your organisation to the other 100 people
Correct.
because the experience was poor, is it?
Yeah, and I personally think with energy, there's a lot of complexity around pricing. So people might get sold a deal, but when they actually get their bill, they do get bill shock. So that first 2-3 months when they're it depends on how often their billing frequency is, but they're likely to go, hang on a minute, I thought this was going to be cheaper, and it's more expensive than my last bill. So if they're churning on cost, which is very cost driven in your industry, you may find they'll come back quicker than you think.
I spent 2 hours in a Telstra store 2 Saturdays ago, and my challenge was I actually had a reasonable view of what I wanted, but after nearly 2 hours with a fairly inexperienced employee who didn't really understand the multitude of offerings that were there, I was more confused when I came out than when I'd gone in as to what was actually available for me. And so, again, I think sometimes we actually overcomplicate things by actually having too many choices for customers. So, Bill, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because I guess customer experiences have morphed from very traditional physical face-to-face, then we've moved into contact centre, then we've now obviously gone down the digital route. We've got a lot more self-service activity happening from customers online, socials in there. You know, what are you seeing in the space about how the organisations, and you're obviously in government, you're in industry, etc. How are people grappling that whole omni-channel? How do I deal with that so the customers get the experience they want?
Well, when I was 5 and entered the industry, I was actually the main I met a guy at a barbecue, and it's in the book, and he wanted to have an expert come in around human-computer interaction and the whole psychology thing that I had learnt during my speech pathology degree. And it was all about getting people out of branches. And Steve, you would remember when they were shutting down branches and it was all over the phone, the internet was really new, and it was like, how can we get people really comfortable to interact over the phone? Using an IVR that was touch tone and speech was very new. So how do we get to use all these different technologies? So I actually think now we've got a lot more channels and touch points, or channels within the channel. So what I mean that is there's digital presence in stores now. So it's not just digital store, phone, it's all interactive, and people see us as one entity. So I think it's really challenging for business, And you mentioned about the archaeology around IT systems. It's true, it is. They want that one seamless interaction. They don't care the channel. And I see that is the biggest complexity. So one is around having new channels. So at the conference, you know, chatbots were the latest thing. A while ago was speech analytics and text analytics. Like there's just flavours of the month. But we've got to bring those channels in and integrate them to existing channels, but also then keep on integrating our channels that we've already got. And that is such a big challenge. So it's expensive, it's timely, and from my perspective, and there's no vendors here, so I can say this, my biggest frustration is speaking to customers and having honest, truthful conversations about what you've seen as a euphoric state. It requires integration into your CRM. You need to know what your history looks like. Your bills are probably, you know, the way you present statements probably need to be reviewed. So when I'm speaking to people, in the back of my mind, I've almost got a computer, a checklist of, if you want to have that experience, you need to have training in place, knowledge management, you need to staff properly. You know, yeah, it's great you want to have blended agents, for example, who can do chat and phone, but they don't exist, they're pretty rare, and you've got to train them, and a chat agent's very different KPIs training to a phone agent. So I think it's just got to be really well thought out, and rather than, we're going to implement social, okay, you've got 2 hours to respond to anything in social, so are you going to run a 24/7 call centre, because you don't at the moment, or contact centre. So it's actually just thinking about the implications of introducing channels and leveraging what information you've got. And also, the shiny new toy is not always the answer. Like, get your basics right, get your house in order, and then innovate.
Do you find the same thing, Anne, that people want to go after the next shiny new toy, as opposed to, you know, you can't have your dessert until
Digital
you've done
guys.
the meat and
Oh god,
vegetables?
the digital guys.
Yeah,
mate,
that's
they're
my world
always-
actually.
Yeah.
That's why we asked XE to come and help us, because part of my transformation role is I get the luxury of looking at every single piece of investment, and what I could see happening, particularly in the contact centre space, is a lot of technology being dropped in, because I think some vendor have been in and sold Nirvana.
Dream.
But I suppose, again, because I've been around a bit, Steve, like you, I've been in contact centres enough to know that actually at the end of the day there's a human being, and I knew from a casual comment from XE that our capacity was at about 99% at the agent level, meaning keep dropping this stuff in, they can't cope with it anyway. So, and really, so we've stopped that now. Well, we haven't stopped it really, we've tried to stop it, but we've got a plan which says first fix the basics before you get to the shiny toys. Because otherwise the danger is you're actually going to have your NPS going the other way, not the right way.
How hard is that though, Anne? Because that's something we're grappling with at the moment. Trying to get people to realise if there's 100 things you want to do, let's have a longer list of what we're not going to do, and a very short list of what we are going to do to make sure it gets done, because we know that's going to. How hard is it to stop people doing stuff?
It's pretty hard, but one of the the small amounts of power I've got, which is not a lot, is we have a process now as part of the transformation that effectively I get to review every single initiative. So, and if anybody wants any money, they have to come to me. So I can then QA each initiative and say, well, where's your payback? And if I can't see a logical payback, then I can, in a nice kind of way, obviously, say, well, we're not getting any money then. So it has helped us for things like virtual agent and so on, where people were pushing ahead with that. It was kind of like, why? And how? We couldn't really get an explanation to that. So it's, now, I would say I am the most unpopular person in the entire company, but you kind of live with that, really. You just get on with it.
So Jan, how does prioritisation happen in your organisation?
Well, we're just kicking it off our prioritisation planning for next year, but I guess for us, and again, we get the benefit of the lens of the big brand who've Medibank's just released their message bot as a bit of a trial targeting our AHM demographic. Scandal. But I think the thing is, at the moment, everyone wants to do everything. So people want an app, they want the message bot, they want the 24/7 responses on web chat, they want someone monitoring your social. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to pay for all of this stuff, because you can't just put it in and then there's no humans there to man it, or you have someone on your social and they put one stupid comment up and then all of a sudden your brand's in the papers the next day.
Yeah.
So for us, it's actually quite easy to prioritise, because being the easy, simple, affordable brand, we don't have a huge budget. So for us, it's about, we want the biggest bang for our buck, high piss off factor, lots of cost to the business, that's where we want to focus our time. And so listening to what our customer pain points are, fixing the basics first. We're calling FY18 the unsexy year because it's fixing all the stuff that's just has to be done, or stuff that we've tried to fix before, we didn't really do it properly because we didn't have much money, we wanted to do 20 things instead of just fixing 3. So it's really just about getting really pointy on our resources, doing 1 or 2 big ticket items, and then making sure that as we monitor that we get the benefits, then we move on to the next stuff.
And when you're doing your QA process, you're looking at not just financial outcomes, but what the potential NPS type impacts are going to be, etc. as well. Is there a multi-dimensional view of how you look at the projects?
We try to. We're still a little bit immature in that, but really what we've done. So, for example, what we've done with Exceed is, particularly in the contact centre space, which we should really emulate that more broadly, is say, well, actually, where are you trying to get to over the course of the next couple of years, and then where are you now, and then what are the things that will take you up that critical path, using the CMMI framework, which has been pretty, well, I find it powerful because at least you can then build from pretty low base to something that's more sophisticated, and it's also said you're not getting it, you've just got to get it in a different order, and that helps drive a more constructive conversation. So we've got a conjoined now business IT committee, of which Murray is a member, to try and ensure that actually you're balancing the IT bits with the business operational improvement bits, because before it was very one-sided, and literally pushing more tools out to the agents is just not going to help.
So can I just add to that? I think the other thing is having the opportunity to step back and look at everything holistically. So looking at just not your technology projects, but your people sort of projects, and assessing the change impact, the change fatigue, the maturity of the organisation to implement change, and actually then looking at, can we put this together with that, because it makes sense and it's kind of similar. And before we even do that, we do need to do some of the getting the house in order stuff first, because you can't have this without that working properly. So I think it's actually the biggest thing I see with companies is they do look at projects, and I'm not just talking about tech projects, but any change really disparately, but it's not. It's like whack-a-mole. You hit something and other things pop up. So you've got to think of it historic, looking at that, and also, don't do change if you're going to have rate change, or that you're going to be busy at a particular time of the year. So think about when you're doing it and you're impacting people. So look at the impact of your frontline staff, look at the impact of your project management team. The biggest thing I find, and I really feel sorry for this, and that is smart BAU resources, because they're SMEs on so many different projects, and then they're expected to manage people, have quality discussions, and do performance management type stuff as well as their own job. And then they're SMEs on all these different projects where they're expected to drop everything to attend a requirements workshop. So we really need to think about our people.
The other component of that I think is interesting is as we move from the very traditional waterfall delivery models to more agile ways of working with persistent long-running teams, people tend to want to get off with a minimum viable product very, very quickly. But if that's not anchored to something that's long-term in terms of the plan, you can end up going down the garden path as opposed to the agile path in terms of the number of different initiatives that are going on. So to me, it does feel like it needs to be anchored back to a bit of a longer-term strategy. Otherwise, MVP ends up being just another bit of business-managed IT and another little project that never quite got there.
It ends up being an excuse. Because it's that wasn't, we had to do MVP, so we couldn't do that, but we'll come back to it later. And then you build up so much tech there because it's MVP, MVP. It's a perennial excuse.
So a couple of things on that. One is like for like. Why do like for like? If you're going to get a sexy new toy, implement it. And I don't see many companies sort of really then innovate. They sort of go, we'll do MVP and then we'll do it. They usually run out of money, they burn cash, they run out of time, or I always call it like shine any ball syndrome. We touch the ball, we pass it around, it's got fingerprints on it, so it's not sexy and shine anymore. So we want a new ball coming in. We've had all, these other things that we've heard about. So it's actually thinking about it. And the other thing is, and I sort of cringe, and I have to have inside voice of maintaining my executive composure and I hear, oh, we do agile, so if we're going to fail, we'll fail fast. And I'm like, no, because you will have success criteria and you'll know what you're doing and you will measure and you will then modify really quickly and you'll understand what you're trying to achieve and have the data support it, so you're not going to fail fast, because it's so hard to pull back change. And then you just get staff that get over it. So
but I think it's an interesting point, because ultimately it comes down to people and culture. You know, all the technology in the world, but if people and the culture aren't living it, then it's not going to happen. In fact, and I'm sure you all know them, the Zappos case study, where, like, you know, if you have a key in world best customer experience, Zappos come up consistently. And they're very interesting, because although they're a startup, they don't ever really talk about technology. They talk about their agents and how they've empowered the agents and how the agents are basically can do whatever they like with the customers. And it builds such an amazing customer loyalty. And they've taken some pretty bold business decisions which kind of go contrary to any commercial common sense, because they've said that actually that, for example, outsourcing distribution gets in there a good customer experience, so we'll insource it so that then we have end-to-end control of our supply chain. So they've started from really, how do we build customer loyalty? Technology is kind of somewhere down the line, really, as opposed to let's get a bright shiny toy and then work out what we do with it.
I found a bright shiny toy in Disney's. They have an app, and the app is, if I get feedback, I can just say I've got feedback about Jan and the experience a guest had commented about Jan, I can put it into an app, and the app then gives Jan that direct feedback, and Jan is line manager. So that was great use of technology. Everyone has these apps, and these apps have announcements at all levels of an organisation. But then truly paper is a duplicate document called no strings attached, like a checkbook, and staff are empowered that if they see something happen, they can use this no strings attached document to walk up to someone and say, and the example they gave was, you know, someone drops an ice cream and they see a little child go and the ice cream falls over, and the person can go up and go, here's a no strings attached, here's a piece of paper, go to any vendor and you'll get a new ice cream. And then they use that for continuous improvement. And the example they gave at Hollywood Studios was the ice cream density, I don't have any other way to call it, I used to work at McDonald's and I understand what they mean, but it was too thick, too frozen, so it wasn't packing in the cones properly. So it was kind of like a clump of frozen ice cream and it was falling off. And by looking at the no strings attached, like manually going through it all, they realised that they were giving away so many new ice creams that they weren't packing the ice cream properly, and the ice cream machines were too frozen for the weather at that point of time in the park. Like, it's interesting.
But it's good use of data.
Paper. It was paper. It wasn't an app, but they use an app as well as the paper, so pretty cool.
In the NAB, I remember, and many of you remember, if you ever go into a bank, or used to, pens on chains. And the number of times you would have annoyed a customer because the pen had run dry or it had been snapped off or it didn't work. When we introduced free pens and had pens with no strings attached, and we handed out 100,000 pens a week, but we were paying bugger all from them, out of whoever the supplier was. It had our phone number on the side of it, and in fact it was the best education we ever had to get our customers to use our contact centres. But you have to think quite differently to go from that mentality of, I don't want somebody to steal my pen, do I want people to steal a lot of my pens? Right? It's a real mindset shift. So I want to move back to people, because I think you picked on that a little bit earlier, Jan, in terms of how do we make sure that the scorecards and the incentive programs, etc., that we have for our people are aligned to the corporate strategy around the customer, and how do we actually develop them a level of resilience for change?
This is a toughie. So this one's been going around in my head all day. I mean, on one hand, you've got the customer experience, and you want someone to be empowered, regardless of what role they are in the organisation, to really deliver great customer experiences. And on the other hand, you want to drive your commercial outcomes so that you're still there to deliver customer experiences tomorrow. And I think, so our sales team's based up in Wollongong, and I started talking to them. We're obviously an affordable brand. We have to be price conscious. We add value to our customers by giving them choice within their insurance products. So one limit extras. If anyone needs to think about switching health insurance, talk to me later. But when you've got a sales team, and I'm sure you guys know, whatever you put in front of them, that is whatever you incentivise them for, they will deliver. So at the moment we're rewarding them on widgets essentially. The number of people you sign up, that's what you get incentivized for. And there's no revenue lens over that. So they are incentivized to just have the quickest conversation. It's most often price related, and they pretty much, it's a race to the bottom. And I was sort of talking to the sales guy and I was saying, look, I'm really interested to sort of look more with a revenue lens over this. We're gangbusters on volume at the moment, but you know, are we really having the right conversation with our customers? Or are they joining on something and then they go to the optometrist or the dentist and they don't get back as much as what they thought they would because we actually just sold them the cheapest product. We didn't actually listen to how often they're going, what their health needs are. I'm thinking about putting more of a revenue lens over so that we're actually having a proper needs analysis with people. And they obviously thought, oh man, this volume stuff's really easy. We don't want Jan to start talking to us about dollars. We want her. And I said it wouldn't change the volumetrics, but it might be a multiplier. So all of a sudden, they were like, oh, more money. So, and they were very much, oh no, Jan, but we're doing a needs analysis now. But they're not, because you can see the products that they're selling. It's all the cheapest product, because of course it is, because then they want to get off the phone onto the next one. So on one hand, you've sort of got that lens to deal with. Your sales guys are always going to want their commission. So whatever you put in front of them, they get. How do you make sure that the two KPIs that you're trying to incentivise in teams that might sit next to each other are actually putting the customer at the front of the mind? It's tough. And I don't think we're anywhere near nailing it. I've only been in this role for a month since I came back from mat leave. So, and I guess the biggest benefit for us, if I'm thinking out loud, we have a very long tenured contact centre in Wollongong. So because of the location of our centre, AHM was originally set up by a guy called Roy Johnson, whose daughter had leukemia. He was a blue-collar worker at BHP, and he found it very difficult to navigate the health system. So he set up a not-for-profit health fund in memory of his daughter Lynn, and people that worked for Roy still work at AHM now. And so there's real passion there for those people about doing the right thing by customers. But how do you keep that at the front of their mind while still making them realise that you can't over-service and spend half an hour talking to someone about their claims, that we're paying them back $25. So it's a tough one, but we have tenure on our side, so we'll see.
The interesting thing about your centre in the Gong, because I've been out there, is that it is basically a community. It's almost like a family-run business. Like
there's
you can
multiple generations of people
feel
work
it.
there.
I went there were babies in pushes because people had babies and kids were finishing school, so they were sitting there colouring in and doing stuff because their mum was still working. It was a very different culture.
Yeah. But you get people that understand the health. So I've listened to calls before and someone said I'm having a mastectomy, and the agent on the phone, this is at Medibank, says, is that the same as a prostectomy?
That'll make you feel
it's
valued
not.
as a customer.
Yeah. So whereas at AHM, because the demographic is very different to most contact centres, most are women in their mid to late, probably late 30s, early 40s with young kids. They actually understand how daunting it can be going to hospital. Come down to the Medibank contact centre in Burke Street, completely different experience. Those guys wouldn't have any idea of the fear that people have. The Medibank book is all legacy customers. They never switch. They're too scared to switch now because they don't want to go to hospital and feel they have to pay a hell of a lot of money. I met a customer the other week. They said we go without meat twice a week to keep affording our health insurance. Like, that is powerful. So how do you hire people in an industry where we're trying to really manage cost? Health costs are increasing astronomically. So you can't. How do you get people to give a crap on the front line? It's really hard.
I'm reflecting on my similar experiences running all the NABS call centres for many years, where you might have had a couple of hundred salespeople talking to customers about the most important financial decision in their life as a home loan, and they're still in their home with their parents and wouldn't know what it was like to pay a mortgage, right? And so how do you train them to be empathetic and to actually understand the topic that the customer's talking about in a sensible and cost-effective manner that the customers want?
And how do you get your strategy team? So a lot of the time your customer experience strategy, you get your strategy guys involved. How do you get them to actually realise what it means to have a conversation about that on the front line? It's not just a strategy that we give to you on a piece of paper and we say go and implement that, because that human lens, you're just giving more and more stuff to that front line, like Anne was saying, you can throw more and more at them, but it just gets so, all they're thinking in their mind is, oh my god, how do I answer this customer question, where do I click the button, it's the widget's taking too long to load, now I've got to fill empty airspace, my manager's breathing down my neck, I need to go to the bathroom, like, the strategy disconnect to the front line, the bigger you get, the harder that is, the smaller you are, it's so much easier because people can go, they can meet these guys, listen to the calls.
So how do you recruit the right people with that as a business challenge that you've put out?
At the front line, or?
Yeah, at the front line in
At the
particular.
front line, we get our best recruits from referrals.
Okay.
So particularly in the Wollongong Centre, our best, and that's probably why everyone's family works there, it's nepotism, because
Yeah.
then someone's endorsing you to actually care about someone, and they're like, yes, I know this person is going to come in and understand our culture, but we're actually really lucky out there because we have very low turnover, so it's not something that's a huge problem for me today.
So the rest of us in the room are probably not going to be helped by your call
No,
because
no.
we've got.
Well, that's why I came. I was
different-
meant to come tonight to listen to learn some stuff
Yeah.
about this myself.
Okay. Well,
I didn't find a friend.
we might play around with that question a little bit more when we come back after a bit of a break. But Bella, we haven't deliberately gone out to beat up vendors that are selling stuff. But I guess that is a bit of a question: is
No.
are people coming up with a shiny new toy
Can I
to
plug
close?
a couple of vendors?
Yeah.
I think the most important function in an operation where there's a lot of people is your workforce management system, and include workforce optimization, particularly around workforce management.
Yeah.
75% of your cost roughly is going to be your people. So actually getting it right, staffing your people at the right time. Then I would go every way all the way through, from not just recruitment, but training, onboarding, quality, performance management, that whole spectrum. And the other tool I think is invaluable, and we saw that when we implemented something within an energy retailer, so we're agnostic, so we did the information architecture, is your knowledge management system. You cannot teach everyone everything in a classroom, and there is too much change to think that, oh, just pull them off the phones because we're going to implement something different, or we've got a rate increase, or especially with you guys around regulatory impacts. So you need to have something where they can be almost like a Google search, looking at a really good knowledge management system where the articles are really easy, you've got fast IT systems, and you can find the information and fill in that white space because there isn't that much, and actually train
the best
them.
knowledge management systems are the one that your people can access and your customers
Yeah.
can access at the same time. At the same time, and it's seamless. They're all getting the same information.
Yeah, and also you can then refer them on, and then you can say, I can email you, or there's a hyperlink or whatever, and you actually then empower your customers, because they don't almost, I know this sounds terrible, they'll trust you if you kind of know, they think you've got it together, but the other thing is they want to know that there's almost a record of the call, or here's a hyperlink or some information I can send you if you're interested to support the discussion we've just had, so they've got some sort of thing that they can sort of park, particularly if it's health insurance and you've just found out you have a mastectomy, you need a mastectomy, you want to have all that information up front. I know I cringed, and I have spent a lot of time in retail, so I'm your worst nightmare to shop, because I will see poor signage, bad point of sale, scuffs on walls, you know, bad sizing, from both working in retail through uni, but also from a CX perspective. But I remember the worst, probably standout scenario is I was working for a bank, and it wasn't NAB, I promise, and we just had bushfires in New South Wales, and this was a Melbourne-based contact centre dealing with like national customers for this bank. And this woman rang up, and she was in a daze, and she said, I'm just calling you because my house is burnt down, and I'm just calling to let you know because we've got nowhere to live, but we've got a mortgage with you, but I have no house. And the person on the phone was new, and because we have this thing of don't give me your best person, I want to see everyone. You know, and this person was, I know, a new performer who's a star, and the person had basically said, oh, that I need to put you through to collections. Not hardship, not anything, but you don't tell someone I'm putting you through to collections, because the area that deals with people who are in this situation is collection. Put the person on hold, and then spent forever, because all the team leaders were in a team leader meeting or lunch. But anyway, there was no team leaders, no floor walkers. And I said, you are going to get her off hold. You're going to tell her that you're going to find someone. Do not mention that word collections again. You are going to tell this woman that you're very sorry for her loss. So acknowledge the fact she's just lost her family home, and you are going to find the right person. You are then going to work with me, and I'm going to help you use your system to find someone to speak to. You're going to warm transfer this call. I don't care that you've got a queue, and you're going to speak to someone at the other end of the phone, and you're going to tell this person that in your other area of the business that she's crying, she's lost her house, and this is a situation. And it's probably the only time, normally when we double jack, we don't get involved. We're a fly on the wall. But this woman was in a state and in these days, and how can you say, I'm going to put you through to collections and then put them on hold for what would have felt like forever for her? So it's all about your people and training them properly.
So Jan, if you need anybody in your contacts, I know this one's probably got a bit of...
Yeah, but then I'll just do what I want now.
So there's so much data kicking around, and we've talked about it, whether it be paper-based, whether it be verbatims, whether it be scraping. So what are you doing with all the data?
Well, that's probably an area we've got going on ahead of everything else. So we built now a big data lake, and we're using it to drive a number of things. So really, from our point of view, the data is, I put it into, say, 3 categories, of which we're pretty well advanced with 2. One is customer, the second is really operational data, and then the third is what I call profitability type data. Obviously, they're all matched up. On customer data, the challenge for the energy industry is the relationship with the customer is not really the relationship with the customer, it's with the meter. So actually identifying the customer is a bit of a challenge, so it's one of the reasons we wanted to get this data in place quite quickly. Through the insights we've now got, is we're getting a much deeper understanding of individual customers, exactly what their relationship is. Small things like what the mobile phone is, what their address is, because we didn't have any of that when we started this. So we can actually treat the customer as an individual, not a meter. And we're now using that to drive a lot of our campaign management insights and improve obviously our sales, but obviously in time of retention. So there's a richness there that's starting to evolve. On the operational side, the data we've got is actually being used. We're using it for a number of things, but we're using it to, for example, find out which of our agents are actually good at the job. And we've got a quadrant based out. We can actually identify the agents that are in the top performing quadrant, and then what we're looking at is exactly what makes them good at the job, and then how do we use that to coach and train the other agents. So that's one area that we're starting to operationalise. But in addition, we've just implemented voice analytics, and we're going to start integrating the customer insights that help us understand what's driving NPS at the end of each call, exactly where they sat with that customer experience. So that will build in time. Profitability is something we haven't got going with yet, but obviously as we become, because our ambition is to become a world-class retailer, from being an energy provider, that's a big leapfrog obviously. And clearly to be a world-class retailer, you obviously need to be very good at customer, very good at products and services relevant to the customer, but you also need to make money as well. So financial profitability elements are one that we're not quite as advanced on yet, but it's there. And in fact, I'm proud to say that last year we won the Oracle award for the fastest ever implementation of their Hadoop platform globally. So and we did that in about a year. So but it's really starting to educate the business about and helping them get them quicker on this journey of customer focus.
So I think one thing EA has done around NPS, because I have this here, it's just a number, so what are you doing with the data? But their operational team, and I ran a strategy workshop after Christmas, and they've actually looked at NPS by contact disposition, by location, and then part of the review was their same type of contact, different location, and I'm talking not just within Australia, I'm also talking offshore, and they were like, what is this? What are they doing really well? Because why are they handling the same calls, the same training information, same workforce planning, system that they're using, what are they doing? And then the other thing is, do we then upskill them and almost find out what the secret source is of this location, who seem to be, from a distance, they've got the same access to everything, but clearly something's going on there that's different. So do we work out what that secret source is and implement it, or do we just change how we transfer calls and just give them those call types because of their great outcomes? I thought that was pretty impressive.
And that's where the IM is really starting to inform the operational decisions.
Yeah.
So early days, but it's
Yeah.
starting to push it out and then really helping the business understand what they see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, as I said, Stephen, a minute ago, I'm not the contact centre expert here, but I put more my IT hat on. I'm not really a huge fan of outsourcing full stop, because I think a bit like the example I gave, to an extent, the outsourcer will have a different set of objectives than you've got as a company. So I think if you are going to outsource, and EA has got outsourced contact centres, so I should put that out there, then you've actually got to be very clear about the standards or the metrics that you want to get from that outsourcer, and ensure that you've got management practices in place. Also, I think inject some of your own management team in there. Don't leave it out there and just assume that they will absorb the culture of your company. But in fact, I think, as Isabella said, because she's had a look at some of our metrics around our outsourced contact centres, they're actually very good. But I think that's because we spend a lot of time inculcating them in the culture of EA. So a lot of the Philippines guys have been down in Melbourne and also in Geelong, where we've got big contact centres. And we've also put our own local line managers into Manila.
I've outsourced a lot of stuff over the years, but with mixed success. So I've had some that have been absolute hits where the outsourced provider has provided better service than we've ever been able to. Whether it be because of the pool of talent that they've got available, the ability to attract a workforce that is happy to work 24/7. The wage cost arbitrage thing is a thing of the past. That's not really the reason that you'd ever do it. But I think the reality is many organisations are so large that to say that they're going to take everything on themselves is potentially unrealistic, and there are people out there that have expertise in doing some of those services. But the question mark is, can you have a scorecard that's fully aligned? Can you have a set of strategic objectives that you're joined at the hip on? And how much are you prepared to invest in it, as opposed to thinking that you're punting something over the fence for somebody else to do because you don't want it to do? I think if you're prepared to take that into the relationship that you have, you can get great outsourcing outcomes. But you have to measure the whole end-to-end experience, and the customer doesn't care whether they were dealing with the onshore bit, the offshore bit, this bit, that bit. They just care about the particular need they had and how it's been serviced. And that's certainly the attitude that we've taken along the way. As I said, probably a sort of 70-30 ratio of success to failure or not achieving the objectives that we want. Voice is probably one of the most challenging ones, about whether people are comfortable about moving voice. And Australians are a particularly demanding customer set and far less accepting of foreign voices, albeit that half of our contact centres are full of people that may not have been born in Australia. So I think you've just got to balance that. But interested in anybody else?
We outsource a lot of our back office functions. And I think the closer you are to the customer experience, the more difficult that decision becomes. And it's something that seems to come in and out of favour. It was all the rage for a while. Vodafone, I remember, put all their contact centres offshore, then they pulled them all back in again. And I think it can cost you in the long run. And I think that lesson's been learned now. But as you get further and further back into the back office, I think there's definite benefits there, because you can hold them to a really strong SLA. Whether you've got, we're in an industry that has huge volume spikes. We have big peak periods, March and then June. So I've got some great offers in June if you want to switch. So I think they can manage that volume up. That's a big pain point for a business if you've got to think, man, we're going to have all these transfer certificates or things we need to process after our peak periods, and we're going to have to recruit and outsource. If you can actually outsource that headache, and it's a process-based SLA, you've got very clear objectives, you're measuring them, it's actually a lot better, because you're still maintaining that customer experience at the front, but the further back you get, I think there's more options for outsourcing. So it does have a place, but it's just where it fits in and how much that customer experience means to you, what industry you're in.
Okay.
So we're a bit Switzerland in the sense of we'll run tenders to outsource, we provide talent and consulting to outsourcers, and we'll work with companies on their outsourcing. So I've seen all different facets. A few things I would say would be, you need to see it as a true partnership. They're an extension of your business. They get the same induction as your people do. I know with one organisation that was a not-for-profit that looked at a partnership and not an outsourcing. We set up the whole floor with pull-up banners with their logos. They got mugs, everything that they would normally get if they were in-house. The other thing is, if you want that true omni-channel seamless customer experience, you want to be able to have end-to-end customer experience. So it might not be, oh, we don't know what happens once we transfer the interaction to the outsourcer because we don't have an end-to-end view of the call or the interaction or the email because it goes into their IT. So I think that you've got to have that connectivity. The other thing is, they run on the smell of an oily rag, however, it is their core business, so they can do it really well. But they will work and perform to how you are measuring them with KPIs. So you need to actually really think about, are you going to pay cost per transaction, cost per whatever? Like you look at your costing models because they're very flexible now. And you also look at, I don't agree with so much penalties, but you look at how can we measure performance that aligns with your CX strategy, but also your efficiencies, because we know we can't, they say it's as little as a third of the cost. And my other thing is we do reviews about, partnerships, and they say it's cheaper, but if you look at contact resolution rates, if the relationship isn't good, it's actually more expensive to outsource than if you kept it in-house. So you got to do it well, and you got to be smart about it.
Okay. Next question.
Steve, I've got a question. 6 or 7 years ago, I was working with REA Group, which runs realestate.com as a brand, and we were scared witless about what Google was going to do coming into the Australian market, and we managed to successfully defend against that. What's going to happen with Amazon coming to Australia to retail? To the panel.
Yeah. We were just talking about this morning. I was just talking to the CEO about this morning, and I think it's not going to be coming all guns blazing. I think they'll be coming in. It's a new market for them. They'll have a bit of a wait and see approach, I think, too. We talked about, are they going to be a bit of a comparative site, or will they sort of just stick with their retail offering that they've got and build that over time? It's a bit of an unknown, I think, especially in services. I'm not sure. I mean, for goods, I think retail, it's going to be pretty impactful pretty quickly. But for services and stuff, I think it'll be a bit of a wait and see how they go. And I think there'll be a lot of people talk. I think they'll be taking out a lot of lunches. I think there'll be a lot of conversations, and they'll be starting to want to get some really good advice about what they're doing.
I don't think Australia is used to organisations that don't feel the need to generate substantial profits, that have a growth mindset.
That, yeah, exactly right.
That's a very different beast to
Very
what we're
different
used to.
Yeah.
And they've proven in terms of where their stock price has got to and where their investor base is, that their investors have been very happy to go on that ride, and I think there's still a way to go. We are an attractive market. We're an affluent country. We're an aspirational country. I know many people that are really worried about Amazon.
We've got 80% of people that are on mobile.
Well, I think that Lynn Fox has already set up a new business in response to it. So, I mean, from a consumer point of view, it's probably a good thing, because it'll wake up the retail industry locally to get its act in gear.
You only have to look at the share prices of the incumbents, the Myers and the rest of it, to see just how much they've been impacted just at the threat of them coming without them even turning up.
I think from an IT perspective, Amazon Web Services seems to be a presenter, a partner at every vendor conference I go to, and they're really smart about it because they understand data sovereignty is an issue here in Australia, and they've set up, quite well here, and then obviously the vendors are leveraging that. And then from a retail perspective, they're going to be game changing. They don't mess around. They'll deliver you goods. You don't have to worry about it all. So I know when I was in the US, in both the courses I was doing, delegates were ordering online on Amazon, doing their Christmas shopping, birthday presents or whatever. So I was...
At a hotel?
Yeah, delivering to a hotel. Both of them, I was staying at hotels both times. And I found it really interesting, and I actually was drinking cocktails, surprise, surprise, with some people. And one of the delegates had come, and she'd been going to the foyer. She had 4 or 5 parcels at Amazon, and 4 out of the 5 had come in, and what'd you buy? So excited. And everyone asked, oh yeah, I've done that, and I've actually done some shopping, and my husband's getting some stuff because we've got some birthdays when I get back. So I just noticed that we are nowhere near that, but Amazon is just, as much as we'd go to a supermarket, they're using it. So I think it's definitely
the
going to be a
infrastructure
game
to
changer.
support that too, because you can have something delivered in an hour, in 2
Yeah.
hours, in 4 hours, 8 hours. Like there's a whole infrastructure
Well, I think even if you look at logistics here, is pretty primitive to be blunt.
So none of you should allow any of your employees to go to conferences because they're just going to order stuff instead of listen to the presenters.
But in fact, one of the best stories I heard about Amazon was I was moderating a conference about a year ago, and the CIO of Washington Post was speaking, who had obviously been acquired by Amazon. And he told a story about how his life had changed under Jeff Bezos. So he said that because they're using all the Amazon platforms to effectively run the newspaper, and some customer who read the Washington Post had written to Jeff Bezos to complain about some article or something, and that was it. He got a personal phone call from Jeff Bezos, and they were on the journey then of building a one-on-one newspaper. So tailoring your media for you, that's his ambition, and it's basically just leveraging all the technologies already built. So it's pretty powerful. It's definitely one to be worried about.
Some people call that fake news.
So, well, actually, I'm not sure about that. I think the Washington Post potentially got more content than many of the Australian papers I read, but then just putting that out there.
What's the next one?
I'm really enjoying the discussion about people earlier on, and I think as we evolve, it's not going to go away. There's always going to be that need for to have empathetic people there delivering the service that we want. Really interested to hear the panel's opinions on how we measure that individual at the front line. Keeping in mind that NPS it's a great measurement to actually see how an organisation is tracking and performing. But for an individual who is dealing with those sometimes dreadful calls that are limited to back-end processes, etc., and NPS isn't something that they can grasp and control all the time. I'm really interested to hear what sort of customer metric you believe is suitable for that frontline person.
Everyone's looking at me.
I have a very strong opinion about data, so go first.
So I sort of feel like there's nothing more rich to a frontline person than one-on-one feedback, and you'll never, the time spent coaching and listening, regardless of what role you're in, these guys spend a lot of their time talking to no one during their day. They come in, they sit at a desk. We're activity-based working here at Burke Street, so you could be sitting next to people you don't know from day to day. It's very individual. They love it when people come, they listen to their calls, they give them feedback. So I think the QA for me is so powerful, and when you're not close to the front line, you think, God, that must be awful having someone come and score your work. But the guys love it, like just that feedback, that one-on-one, talking them through what you could have done better. They get an opportunity to nominate calls that that they think are great calls as well. So I think the QA is always going to be part of it. We measure NPS at an agent level, and after what Anne was saying, I think we're still very early on out. We've just got a new provider for our NPS data. We'll be starting to look back, not necessarily at the interaction, but if you're still with us 90 days after we sold you something, but you're a bit pissed off about your experience, is that a consistent approach? Because when people join, they all say it's been a great experience because they bought the product. You don't hear from the people because they're not customers. Mm-hmm. But I think QA is the biggest one really, and the adherence measures, all of that stuff, we don't really talk to them about that anymore. It's really the verbatims that they get in the QA, and we don't have set scores. It's really just a one-on-one conversation like you would have with any other employee.
Well, I think I've said what we're starting to put actual measurements in place that allow us to use analytics to inform us about what really drives effective interaction with the customer, and then picking on those agents saying, right, okay, what have we learned from those, and how do we capitalise on that on our other agents. But it's early days. I mean, I think the challenge of the energy industry is probably even more regulated than banking, actually, which is hard to believe, but it is. So the calls have to be monitored, just not from a point of view of the customer, sales, etc., but also compliance. So it's quite a challenging type of environment that we have to operate in, but
we look a little bit at first call resolution. We're just starting to sort of, and not really maybe at an agent level, but if someone calls back within 7 days and it's for the same issue, well then what does that mean for that agent? And we're measuring it, but we're not implementing it in the frontline scorecard at the moment, because it's more an opportunity to try and get the guys to think think of the guy next to you. So if this person's going to ring back because you didn't do what you said you were going to do, you didn't manage the expectations, but it maybe as we start to get the data and see if that could actually change the metric, we may introduce that into the scorecard.
So before we move on, Amazon, they've got my book on iBooks and Kindle app and whatever, so I can't diss them because they've supported my book and picked it up. So just putting that out there, Amazon, thank you. So back to your question about feedback, I think there's a few things. In a contact centre environment per se, if you think about if we had workforce planning, quality, call recording in an entire organisation, can you imagine how different our world would be? Like, they are seriously under the microscope. How long was your interaction despite the channel? What was your post-call work? How long did you go to the bathroom for crying out loud? So it's really, really sort of really, really detailed. So I think a couple of things is I've noticed there isn't a positive correlation between quality management scores and NPS in a lot of the companies I work with. So I wonder, why are you measuring quality in such a way if your NPS doesn't reflect that? Because if your customer's happy, whatever. The other thing is we're asking people for feedback all the time. We'll call them or email them or whatever, and you're almost getting to the point where we've saturated the market by asking customers for feedback, that you're either going to get really happy or really disgruntled people. So have we skewed our data? So if we are using NPS or whatever, if they've actually stayed. And the other thing is, I feel as a consumer, don't ask me. You should know. Listen to my call, use speech analytics, use text analytics on my email or my chat, or, you know, I'm in a store, look at my pattern within the store. You're probably tracking my mobile phone. Look and see what I've done, look at my patterns, you know, like I know when I was at NAB, we looked at tracking behaviour within a branch. So we were redesigning branches, and I know this sounds weird, but I've done this within training within retail, and that is, you know, you walk in, we look left first. So all your collateral should be left, for example. People assimilate more to any marketing material if there's a face on there. So I don't know why organisations have these panels with just text, because unless there's a face, we don't look as long. So we're constantly asking back to feedback. We're constantly asking for feedback, and I think that we should already have the data in place. We've got the data and do it. And the other thing is, it's got to be timely. And the other thing is, as humans, we can't extract an interaction and go, this is our whole interaction, and therefore this person, we've scored it. So I feel sorry for people, agents, frontline staff, because we're asked to measure our interaction, and as a human being, it's very hard psychologically for us to detach ourselves from our whole perspective of an organisation. And you know, we talk about journey mapping, what happens before they even contact you. So I think it's really hard, and it's a tough job. You answer the phone every day. Like, it's hard. You know, I've done, for example, that outsourcing opportunity I spoke about. I picked up the phone and did offers and retention type calls, and it's hard. So, and they do it every day.
So I'm conscious I committed to a few people that I'll try and close around 8. I'm happy to take one more question from the group.
Yeah, I have a question. Just in regards to CX, one of the things that frustrates me with CX is that it's almost a specialist capability or skill, as opposed to something which we're actively driving into an organisation where everybody, in fact, should have accountability for CX. My question is, how far, sort of maturity-wise, do you think we are in Australia, and what's it going to take to get us to a point where CX is actually part of business as usual, part of what everybody is involved in, rather than us being retrospective in our application of CX onto existing experiences?
I think Amazon will help, because obviously that will drive a different performance standard and a sense of necessity, which is maybe not the wrong way to do it, but you know, as the benchmark moves up, you'll either move up or you'll disappear, and that's just a fact of life. I mean, one of the stats that I like to quote is a guy from Yale who basically said that something like the pace of companies' life, say if you take 50 years ago, was about 65 years, and now it's about 15. And by 2020, most of the S&P 500 will be companies we've never even heard of. So the whole lifespan of companies is accelerating. Therefore, you've really got to be very connected with your customers if you're going to stay in the game. a word I used to use a lot at ANZ was you've got to be relevant for your customers, and that's relevant in every sense. Your products have got to be right, your service have got to be right, and then your interaction with customers have got to be right. So you're going to have to be 100% tuned into what that customer wants, and that's going to be really, really deep into your culture, which was why I think Zappos is very successful. I know it's small, but it's really started from the place of whatever that customer wants, we've got to do it. I mean, I told a story that I was going back to Scotland at Christmas, and I suddenly realised, as you do, sitting in the airport, I hadn't packed any jumpers, right? So Scotland's pretty cold. So I literally went online to a retailer that I know there, outdoor retailer, ordered a couple of jumpers that I thought, yeah, they'll do. And it said, basically, when would you like them delivered? I said, I knew my plane landed at Glasgow Airport about like midday. And I thought, right, 1:30 I should be in the house. I said 1:30. I trucked up, put my suitcases down, 1:30 ring at the doorbell, jumpers, really well packaged. And I'm not sure you'd get that in Australia. Now, why would you get it in the UK from a relatively small retailer? Because you've had people at Amazon who, if they don't meet that standard, then they know they won't be in business. So, so I think it's maybe not a good way to drive that customer thing, but it's going to be survival of the fittest, actually.
I think just to extend on that, I think the reality is we need some people to help, right? And whether they be chief people officers, chief customer officers in organisations, to set some standard and some guideposts. But I actually believe that customer is now in just about every person's job description.
Absolutely.
So whether you are in a physical network, whether you're in a contact centre, whether it be the types of measurements and the technology and the data that we've got that we're now using more intelligently, we're mashing that up, we're putting it in front of people, and we're showing them what the customers are thinking and what they're saying. So I actually feel like it doesn't matter whether you're back office, front office, you're part of an outsourced provider that's part of your service profit chain. To me, it feels like we're moving there. I just think it's taken us a while to get there, and it's going to get exponentially faster to compete with the likes of some of those organisations like Amazon, and also organisations that we haven't seen yet that are not probably that far away. And whether it be an Uber experience or whatever, somebody else is about to come out there and deliver something completely different to us. So I think that's a good point to wrap up. Any final comments from you, Jen, or you, Bella, before we let people go and have a drink?
Yes, I just have one thing, but I'm looking for Carolyn or Maya. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I'd also like to thank our panel members. So this is our first of a series of, I suppose, salons that we're having where we're going to have people to sort of talk and interact. So I think it's been a huge success. So I would like to thank Anne for coming along, Jan for being my phone a friend this morning when we had Karen with a family emergency not having to come, that I sort of had spoken to Jan and said, please come and it'll be fine, you're coming anyway, so just sit on a different chair. So I'd like to thank you for being so flexible. And Steve, he has been my mentor for a very long time. Steve was my client at NAB 13 years ago, a long time ago, 13 years ago actually. And then when I worked at NAB was my mentor, and has still been heavily involved in my life, my career, shaping Exceed, and having someone out there to run ideas by who he's, as you can probably tell, if you can't handle the truth, don't ask Steve your opinion. So I'd like to thank him for emceeing tonight and keeping us on schedule and everything sorted. So yeah. So, and thank you all for coming. Have a lovely evening. Please interact with each other, share your business cards, and this is all
Bella,
about
this
you.
is about digitisation. No one should have business cards.
Well, we do.
Let's see who's ahead of the game.
Swipe each other.
Yeah.
Share details, share stories. I think one thing I learned about travelling, and even, and the reason why I started these, is we have great stories to share, and we're very smart people here in Australia, and so we should be collaborating a lot more in a non-competitive environment. So the bar's open until we run out of alcohol, because it's our place. So stay as long as you like, and yeah, chat to each other and say hi and ask questions, ask who you are, what are you doing, what are your biggest challenges, what do you think you're doing well, and share your stories if you've got any questions. One thing I found, and you're right, for speaking with a lot of C-level clients, it's really lonely at the top. And I know before, where I've got an awesome team at Exceed, you can't say, Jesus, what if the work stops? What if the phone stops ringing? Because I've relied on the phone ringing. So, you know, you don't want to even maybe sometimes tell your peers, I'm thinking about something, because you're supposed to be the domain expert in what you're doing. So you kind of have to have your shit together. So now you don't have to. So chat to each other and have fun.